Reverend Mel Caraway, past president of the Texas Impact Board of Directors, and I'm currently serving as the Interfaith Climate Coordinator for our affiliate, Texas Interfaith Power and Light. As an active member of the U.S. faith climate advocacy community, I've attended several previous sessions of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. These conferences of parties are commonly known as COPs, and this year's meeting is COP 28. This year I've opted not to attend in person, and instead I'm following the conference online. And you too can follow along online from your home or office. The QR code on the screen will take you to the COP platform, where you can follow the COP outline and see menus of all the sessions. Many of these sessions are being archived as on-demand webcasts that you can watch at your convenience. Here's a second QR code for a special list of side events. Side events are workshops and panels on a wide range of topics, and the speakers include academics, policy advocates, and representatives of impacted communities. Subnationals also play an important role in climate mitigation, but they also have responsibilities for many aspects of human well-being. Cities, in particular, face pressures to address human flourishing in concrete ways, and many of those ways involve our relationship with nature. In today's program, we are looking at just a few of the presentations from a discussion at COP28 called Greening America's Cities. The discussion was hosted by America is All In. America is All In is a coalition of subnational and civil society actors championing a whole-of-society mobilization to deliver the transformational change that will meet the challenge of the climate crisis and secure a healthy, prosperous, equitable, and sustainable future for everybody. You can learn more about the work of America is All In by accessing the QR code that's on your screen now. You'll hear mayors from 2 American cities sharing innovative strategies they are taking to ensure all members of their communities have access to green spaces, walkable neighborhoods, and even urban gardens. First of all, though, Dr. Cecilia Martinez, the Chief of Environmental and Climate Justice at the Bezos Earth Fund, explains why the fund is investing in greening cities. Dr. Martinez introduces the fund and then introduces 2 mayors who have received funding through the Greening America's Cities initiative.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is a really exciting panel for us. At the Earth Fund, we directly connect our investments that protect the climate and preserve nature with those that benefit the most vulnerable communities. So it's no accident that my title is Chief of Environmental and Climate Justice. But let me tell you why that's so important to us. Globally, the World Health Organization data shows that 99% of the population breathe air that exceeds WHO guideline limits, with obviously low and middle-income countries suffering the highest exposure. Of course, we know that internal to countries, those inequities also are highly exacerbated. Air quality is strongly connected to the health of our natural world and the Earth's climate because so many of the drivers of air pollution, including local air pollution, are also direct sources of the greenhouse gases that are changing our climate. In the US, and now we're recognizing worldwide, heat is becoming one of the leading causes of death. In the US alone, it is the heat change is projected to result in 100,000 additional heat-related deaths per year by 2100. Again, very likely those with low income and those in communities of color. As of September, the U.S. hit the worst level of hunger in decades, with 54 million Americans having no reliable access to food. These are the problems and the challenges that face us today, in addition, and they are interlinked with climate change. But we know we cannot tackle these issues as if they are disconnected from each other. They are all interconnected and interrelated, and also all too often are the result of the social and economic inequality that has plagued our history. While urban areas occupy less than 1% of the Earth's land surface, they house more than half its people, and it is estimated that by 2050, 68% of the global population will live in cities. Today, almost 3/4 of fossil fuel carbon dioxide emissions emanate from cities globally. In addition, because of inadequate maintenance and the increasing impacts of climate change, urban infrastructure systems can increase the magnitude of natural hazards such as flooding and urban heat island effects. For all these reasons, nature-based solutions and green spaces present a critical and important set of overall climate solutions. They create wildlife habitats, preserving natural areas within a city. They can regulate air and water pollution. Properly planned, landscapes can help achieve reductions in temperature, reducing urban heat island effects. They can promote urban natural water systems. They can promote climate resilience. Green spaces can help to reduce the risk of flooding in periods of heavy rainfall. And of course, they can support climate mitigation. Urban forests help to mitigate climate change by capturing and storing atmospheric CO2 and by reducing energy needs for heating and cooling. In the contiguous U.S., urban trees store over 708 million tons of carbon, approximately 12.6 of annual CO2 emissions. This is an important solution that we cannot ignore. However, as I mentioned before, we also know that these green spaces are distributed in a highly unequal manner across cities. This is why the Bezos Earth Fund has invested in the initiative called Greening America's Cities. It's an innovative new initiative that puts the power and the money in the hands of communities who know best what type of green solutions they need to address. We have invested $50 million this year, and we are committing $400 million through 2030 to the establishment of green spaces in our country's most vulnerable communities. It is a model of how to build an ecosystem of support to create these green spaces whereby no community should be left behind. Now, all of that comes from the left brain, the mind part of what it means to have green spaces in the U.S. Now, let me talk a little bit about the heart. As we were creating this initiative, one of the things that kept coming back to me from my own personal history was my remembrances of nature. I didn't grow up in the city. However, my remembrance of nature are so often intertwined with the intimate recollections of family and community. The endless search for the four-leaf clover with my clans of cousins, the walks with my grandmother and my grandfathers where they shared their memories of their youthful tree climbing and fishing and hiking days, or simply the family celebrations in the mountains behind my home. And everyone has their own unique, joyful experience with nature. Greening America's Cities represents our commitment to ensure that these experiences continue to be part of our community life and into the future, especially in urban neighborhoods where nature is often much too distant for its community members. The hopeful news is that we now recognize green spaces are places where families can foster and grow their social relationships. They are parks where families can play together. They are nature trails where families can learn about the earth and its beauty with each other. They are urban gardens where people work together to bring life-sustaining food to their community. And they are places of reflection to nurture and support emotional health. The use of green spaces in communities is as varied, and their beneficial possibilities are as diverse as the communities that we help to support. This is, again, why the Bezos Earth Fund has made this commitment to creating the Greening America's Cities initiative and to investing in organizations that are part of the backbone of community life. We also believe that climate change solutions cannot be divorced from equity and justice. So we have started with these investments in 5 communities across the country, and we'll be supporting the development of future green spaces across the country. On today's panel, you'll hear directly from 2 of the organizations we are supporting about the incredible work they have been doing within and being driven by their local communities. And of course, from 2 mayors who are leaders in this city, in their cities, in moving equitable green spaces. This is a new way of doing things for the Bezos Earth Fund, and I would venture to say this is a new way of doing things for philanthropy as a whole. But we think it's a critical shift and one we hope to build on into many of our initiatives moving forward. So thank you for this time.
As I listened to Dr. Martinez talk, I was thinking how resonant her comments are for us here in the state of Texas, our state which just voted to make a significant new investment of $1 billion for our state parks. It's an initiative that Texas Impact championed, and I'm so very proud that we are taking this step as a state toward achieving some of the benefits that Dr. Martinez talked about. As we listen to the mayors, the first mayor that we are going to hear from is Mayor Lily Mei, who tells about a number of green initiatives in her city of Fremont, California. Since I'm an avid gardener and I'm working to expand church-based gardens and horticulture in the Dallas area, and specifically, but also throughout Texas, I'm particularly interested in her focus on urban farming and how she connects health and mental health to access to nature.
But I could definitely relate to the idea of enjoying trees. I grew up in Pennsylvania, where I grew up next to a wildlife preserve, but now I live in California. And when we talk about equity and access, it really is important. I'm proud to see so many of my fellow mayors here today, and I know some of us have joined the 10-minute pledge, which is ensuring that our communities can walk and have access. So when it comes to looking at diversity and access too, we are also one city which is the 4th largest in population, the 2nd largest in land size, over 92 square miles, and giving people access to this recreation has never been more important than these last couple years. It's about physical health, it's about mental health, and so having that ability to have people reach that is important. We look at social equity, we look at the fact that when we do our housing plans, can we ensure that we have access to that? And even repurposing land. Part of our city's history used to be in farm and agriculture. And when some of those have closed, we have repurposed those to give greater access. For example, in our North Ardenwood area, we have the Dig Deep Farms, which is allowing us to have a food hub. So allowing it to deliver and ensuring that people who may not have had the chance to do farming have access to that. We also have local ecology and agriculture, Fremont, and having things like even with our senior centers, which we now have called Age Well Centers. My son says it's just planning for my own future. So when we do that, having spaces and food boxes, because it allows people the chance to relax and to see how they can make that contribution. Right now, one of our key projects that we're focusing on is a community center by Lake Elizabeth, and we're hoping that when we talk about equity and access, we have some of the most innovation in terms of manufacturing. We have a small manufacturer in our city that some people have heard of, which is Tesla. But when it comes to other areas too, with biomedical and these types of new technologies, people may not know that we have the most clean tech hardware manufacturing in the United States. So when it comes to lithium batteries and other different types of opportunities and greening that, we want people to be able to play and understand what types of skills there are. We wanted to even upskill and during the pandemic get people access so that they can get jobs in the future that will allow them to be able to live, not just fish, but fish well and be able to adapt to the future. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. The other thing that I'm very proud of is that we're talking about engaging our youth. And we also have a Fierce Club, which is Fremont. I'm trying to remember all the different acronym letters. But basically they do everything from food to cooking, to different challenges. And this is important. As we're building our cities, we're updating a lot of things like our master park plan, which is the first time we've updated in 25 years. We have 63 parks in our city. We have 7 of the regional parks. And in fact, we have the only campground in the Bay Area, an urban campground. And right now we have campgrounds for RVs and tents. In the future, we'll have yurt camping. So it's kind of glamping for the millennials. And looking at ways that we can incorporate that space is some of the things that we hope to share. And so I'm very excited to listen to some of my fellow panelists today and to learn. That's what I think is the best thing when we come here, is I'm not ashamed to reuse, rinse, recycle, and reuse your ideas.
Yes,
so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Mei.
Did you notice what Mayor Mei said about skills development? She said, we want people to be able not just to fish, but to fish well. Isn't that what we all want? We want productive work, not just the basics. The second mayor we're going to hear from today is Mayor Lauren McLean of Boise, Idaho, another of Greening America City's grant recipients. Mayor McLean talks about Boise's initiatives, and she specifically mentions how the city is working to include refugees in their strategies.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the Bezos Fund and ICLEI for hosting this today, and it's great to be at the America All-In platform as a mayor that early in my time joined the America All-In Challenge. It's super exciting to be here. I want to talk about a couple things. And Celia, I really appreciate your story, and it actually got me thinking about home. It made me really want to go home because we live in a place, and I truly believe that when you are connected to the place in which you live, and we live in a city that's in between a river that actually makes noise because there are rocks and it's shallow and there are fish, and now we have mussels that have returned because it's so clean, and foothills to the Rocky Mountains that you can access and then go for hundreds of miles on foot or on bike. And when you're grounded to the place in which you live, and you create opportunities for people to connect to the people they live near, you have a much richer community and social capital that carries you forward and keeps your city safe now and into the future. And so, I actually got my work in politics from the advocacy side. When I was 24, I led an effort to pass a levy in our city to then set aside open space above our city and our foothills. And it was something that everybody said couldn't be done. 500 people showed up to volunteer over the course of 4 months. We took a poll that had us at 40%, and one was 60%. And it was a game changer for our community. I didn't know it then. But because it got us thinking about who we could be and how important access to the outdoors was, and what we wanted our city to look like in the future, and importantly, what people could do to make it happen. We passed another one 10 years later. I've committed as part of the Beautiful Challenge by 2030 to have invested $30 million in open space. So we will, between now and when I leave this office, have another levy of $10 million, not just to protect open space, but parks throughout the city, as well as river access and habitat preservation, both in our city and, I actually anticipate looking at the headwaters as well, like how you protect the river running through it. And we have a goal, set a goal 3 years ago, after I became mayor, of making sure that every kid in our city could walk safely to parks or open space. And the safe is key as an urban person, because you want your city to be safe, but you want your kids to be able to walk safely. And so that means you have to think about pathways. We've developed a pathway plan of 112 miles that probably take us 20 years to set aside, but along between farmlands and the foothills, along those canals, ditches, laterals, and drains, you got to have good urban core neighborhoods with safe sidewalks to get your kiddos safely to parks in all neighborhoods. And we're using that metric, and it actually makes us invest in places that weren't invested in historically. So we've got maps. We know who can't walk to a park within 10 minutes. We know also where there are safety issues. And it's guided the purchases of land that we've made since our council passed that to create parks of the future. As part of the America the Beautiful pledge, we also said we would take our parks and natural areas and make sure that about 30% of those, because the 2030 play, would be natural areas. So we're taking parts of our parks and creating natural spaces that are native, that allows people to experience less of a developed park and more of a natural area, and what you would expect in Boise, and that does so much more. We have taken land like thinking about flyover land that can't be industrial land, but we've had to buy homes because it's under the airport flight zone, and developed urban ag, working with refugee organizations to then have land so that those families can farm, and then sell their foods. And we're looking at food hubs as well. We're using ARPA dollars to develop food hubs through the local farmers markets. At the end of the day, I'd say that this work is really important because it builds on the legacy we have as a city based in place and with community engagement, but really at the same time allows us to meet our climate goals because we know where we have a goal of doubling our tree canopy by 2030, but we've mapped where those trees need to be. And you can imagine the neighborhoods that don't have them. They're the underinvested neighborhoods, and that is guiding the work that we're doing with community groups to invest in and plant the trees in those areas that need it, in the same way that our 10-minute safe walk to a park is guiding where we purchase parkland. There's a lot of exciting work happening. Love hearing what Fremont's doing. Look forward to hearing what you all are doing, because community groups are a big part of how we get this done. Thank you.
Great.
The panel also included community-based advocates who are working with their local governments to strengthen social and environmental justice. One of these advocates is Sandra Smithers, the executive director of a community-based organization in Delaware. Now, this clip is a little bit longer, but her story is very profound. So let's listen to her now.
Good afternoon, and thanks to you all for having me. It's such a pleasure to be in the midst of people who are doing things, and to listen to the mayors let us know that our visions are possible. The vision that we have for our communities are actually possible. It's hard to talk about our community without realizing that there is a history that led us to where we are. And I came from a community, a small neighborhood that was situated in the midst of other neighborhoods that were not very friendly. The neighborhood that I came from was one that was built for African American World War II veterans, because during period of segregated housing, there was no housing for our veterans who were returning. My father happened to be one of those veterans, and so we were lucky enough to be in this community. Now, the community was unlike many other communities because it was totally two-parent families, because veterans married and brought their wives and their children. So there were lots of children, and there were these two-parent families, and we were encircled by hostile communities. So we were like an enclave, and we had to depend upon ourselves, and we took care of each other, and ultimately we had a school, and our school was populated by people who lived in our community because the community was totally integrated with white-collar and blue-collar workers. So we had lots of role models for those of us who didn't know, and it was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. Well, with desegregated housing came the opportunity to expand to other communities, and that resulted in what we know as white flight. And as a result of white flight, then other housing became available to our community, and ultimately, this community, this area, this Route 9 corridor became predominantly African American. And that's where my story began. It was a story of disinvestment. It was a story of allowing industry to move in close to our communities, polluting industry, so that there was very little monitoring of it. So naturally, our environment became quite polluted. Well, there are those of us who chose to stay here because there was such a great legacy from this community. And I went off only to go to college and then to go to graduate school. And that gave me the opportunity to see that there were so many other communities that did not have this situation, and so many others that did. And the fact that they were usually divided by socioeconomics. And so I came back to my community, and when I finally retired, and age is one of those things that gives you the opportunity to live through generations and to know the history. So I came back, and when I retired, I'm a retired educator. when I retired, I spent my time advocating for my community that had now grown from this singular little neighborhood to a whole Route 9 area of 12 neighborhoods. The interesting part was that each of these neighborhoods most of them had an embedded park. But because of the disinvestment of government, the parks had overgrown. Many of them were littered. Some of them were havens for drug distribution and all of the other kinds of issues that confront many low-income communities. Well, we could not have that. So we set out to make a change. And we worked very hard. Our initial bit of work was to take over the neighborhood swimming pool, where we changed it from being a place that was a place where you would not want your kids to get in the water to one that was really an oasis. And government, local county government, allowed us to work this swimming pool, and then they began to support us. And after a while, they began to invest money. And then the pool became a place where everybody wanted to come, and the county then put us on their website and said this was a place that people should come to visit. And then county parks, county camps started using the pool, and the pool was an oasis in our community. Well, if this worked with the parks, we figured this should work everywhere else. But the problem that we had was resources. Oh my gosh, you cannot imagine what it was like when we received a grant from the Bezos Earth Fund. You just cannot imagine, because typically what happens is that those at the top determine what should happen at the bottom. Now, they don't usually know what's going on at the bottom, but they have this plan, and everyone is supposed to fit into it. Well, along comes the grant. And oh my gosh, the change that it made already. And we've only had it for a short period of time. But let me tell you some of the things that happened. We had neighborhoods where people had never been allowed to go out of their back gate because they didn't know that it could happen. It was so overgrown with trees and overgrowth. And so when they had problems with the sewer and they contacted the county says, oh, we feel really bad about that, but we can't get in there. It's overgrown. And that's not our job. And they contacted utility companies about down lines. And the utility company said, we will be glad to come in and correct your lines, but we can't get in there. It's all overgrown. So we get this grant. And within a few weeks, it's all cleared out. And neighbors are coming out and they're saying, we're so thankful, we didn't even know this was out here. And so now the county can get in and clean the sewers, because there were people who were having very waste coming up through their sewers because there was nothing that could be done. But now there's something that can be done. We have partnered with our county, and because one of the problems that we had is that high unemployment. So we determined that we would talk with the county about having us use workforce development to take over these parks, to maintain the parks. And we can provide then employment for young men who typically cannot be employed by agencies because many of them have a felony in their background, so they can't pass the background check. So here we are now. We're able to employ them. They are so happy. They're involved, but we haven't stopped with that. What we have determined is that they should develop their own company to do this kind of thing. And in developing their own company, they can then bid on jobs that have to do with horticulture. We've partnered with the local horticultural society, and they're going to train them. And then another person came in, and she's actually going to allow them to get college credit for some of the training that they've gotten. So now we've opened a pathway to careers. And we have invested in our community, and we have people who are going to do a wonderful job at maintaining the parks because it's their park. And so we look at all of these things and we say, well, why is it that nobody thought of this before? Well, typically with grants, you know how they come. They tell you what you have to use them for. So if they tell you that you've got to use them for kids, and cleaning out the sewers doesn't fit with their idea of the kids, then you can't use the grant for that. But Bezos came along and said, you can use it in the way you see fit. And so we're using it in the way we see fit, and it's having an immediate impact on our community. And so it's just a delight to see these kinds of things happening, and this is a different model. Because with this model, the solution is coming from the bottom, where people actually can make the difference. And so that's my story, and I'm glad to tell it.
To learn more about the Greening Cities initiative, we invite you to check out the link that's on your screen right now. Well, friends, that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And tomorrow we're going to dig into the nitty-gritty of emissions reductions and how cities and states can help their nations meet their Paris Agreement commitments. We hope you'll join us once again. And please let your friends know if you're enjoying these programs. Have a great evening.